Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. It's 1 o'clock. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stephanie. I am the head of client success here at Reply. We have Josh here on the line as well. So today we're going to be walking through Reply's native integrations. So Salesforce, Copper, Pipedrive, Hubspot, and Zendesk. Hubspot is the newest native integration to Reply. So we'll be going over those and just different ways that you can automate your CRM with Reply, some filtering rules that you should definitely know about to make that process a lot easier for you. I just want to let you guys know that I do have my German Shepherd lying here beside me. I will do my best for him not to bark, but he may say hello. So I'm gonna try to keep him quiet, but I felt bad putting him in the basement because he doesn't like it down there.
He also loves integrations, so we couldn't let him miss
He does, more than you, Josh.
That's it.
We will be keeping an eye on time today. I don't know if you guys read our last two sessions, you probably noticed that we tend to go over a little bit, which is great because we love giving you guys information, but we do want to keep an eye on time today. So as Josh is going through the integrations, we will do our best to answer questions as they come in. If we can't get to them, then we'll definitely answer them within the last 10 or so minutes of our session today. So Josh, take it away.
Absolutely. So there are a few main integrations that I want to touch on. To start, before I dive into any specifics, on the integrations page, we have a number of different options: Salesforce, Close, Pipedrive, Zendesk, Copper, and Hubspot. For the purposes of this demo, Salesforce, Copper, and Hubspot all work the exact same way. So I'm only going to be showing you a mix between Salesforce and Copper, as we don't have a live HubSpot account to kind of mess around with today. But functionally, everything is going to be kind of set the exact same way that I show you today. So if you have any questions, these also pertain directly to HubSpot. And then we'll dive a little bit into Pipedrive as well as Zendesk to just kind of round out anybody else that's using those CRMs, and then we can open it up to general Q&A at the end. So with that, depending on kind of what you need to do, the most robust options that we have available are going to be Salesforce and HubSpot. They are bi-directional. We can pull any contacts in as well as push any information back out to your CRM of choice. Copper, on the other hand, is only one direction. We can only pull information in from Copper into Reply. But again, the settings are very much the same. So that being said, we will go into configure, and you will have two different profiles. Default is going to give you a pre-rendered list of settings, and you cannot adjust those. So for the most part, you are going to be using custom, but we do have default there if you're just kind of getting used to new integrations, not sure what to kind of expect. Default is there for you to kind of get your feet wet. But on your custom profile, you'll be kind of presented with a number of different sync steps. And each of these will pertain to the different types of information that you're trying to pull through. So for Copper, we only have the two types of information here: leads and people in Copper coming in directly into people. And in things like Salesforce and HubSpot, the criteria and sync lists are quite more vast. So you can essentially push information through, pull information back, as well as merge different fields that relate to people statuses as well as inbox categories. So if they respond to you a certain way in your sequences and you want that information mapped over, we have those fields available for you. And within each of these sync steps are two different options. We have the field mappings and we have the filtering rules. By default, each of these different steps is going to be turned on, which means if you set the main integration toggle, this one in the top right corner, to active, it's instantly going to start pulling in information based on the default settings that each of these sync steps has. Meaning, if you do not set a filter rule, if this is completely blank, we're going to try to pull in every single person that we can from your HubSpot, Salesforce, or Copper account into Reply. And this is probably not necessarily what you want. So before you engage the main toggle, click into the step of your choice, go to filter rules and set some type of logic system in here. It can be as vast or as narrow as you'd like it to be. The example that I've used is just set up to bring in people with a very specific email address, but the options are essentially only limited to the fields that you have available in your CRM, and that includes custom options as well. So I can scroll through and I can, again, make these lists and rule sets as kind of broad or specific as I need them to be, and only pull in certain subgroups at a time. So I'm only focusing on the people that I need to reach out to at that particular moment, as opposed to just having a blanket kind of copy of my CRM in reply. And then I have to go pick and choose who I'm trying to reach out to from my main people page. So this is a way to kind of just narrow things, make it more specific for you, grant easier access to those exact lists, and just make it all generally more organized, as your accounts should be. The only limitation here for the filters that we can set, any field is fair game as long as it is not a checkbox. So within the Salesforce, HubSpot, or Copper parameters, there are different field types. If it's simply a checkbox yes or no option, we cannot interact with those. It does have to be an actual text or numeric field value that we can then pull in. And once you've set up your filter rules, you've specified the people that you actually want to work with, you can then go into field mappings and choose the types of information that you want pulled over. So by default, for the baseline to create a contact record in reply, you do need at least your email address and first names. I've told this to many people on onboarding sessions, but first names do not have to be accurate, though you probably want them to be. For the sake of creating the contact record, all that's required is that the first name value is filled in. It can be a dot, it could be whatever you want, just needs to exist. Email addresses primarily should be valid.
Josh, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about field mappings. So like you said, the default setting or the default fields that you need are email and first name. Would you recommend that you use multiple fields, or do you think that the default would be enough?
For the most part, you should be using multiple fields, but not to the point where you're mapping every single option available to you, because that becomes a little bit excessive. For reply, while we have and we're leaning and building towards a more CRM-like suite of features, we are not at the capacity of a full-on CRM. So some of the information that you need in a platform like Salesforce or HubSpot isn't necessarily required for reply. So my rule of thumb is only pull in the information that you actually plan on using, whether that be for a variable or for filtering purposes. If you do not have a direct need for it in your sequences, there's no need to pull that information in. So don't bother mapping that option. So usually like location information is good for segmenting your lists. Contact owner is good for if you have a team, just segmenting based on who owns who, and then pushing those to particular sequences. Anything else that you can think of really for segmentation. But things like creation date, unless you're planning time-based sequences, no real need to have that included. You're just going to end up cluttering your contact list and just make it harder for you and the rest of your team members to find the information that you need.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. And there are no limits to the amount of fields you can. So if you do want to just kind of map every single field that you have available, there's no problem with that. It's ultimately up to personal preference. But again, it just makes things a lot smoother and just more easily accessible if you are only mapping the fields that you find relevant.
Okay, perfect. And I do have another question. This is a question I get a lot from customers when we're talking about integrations.
Yep.
And maybe you were going to touch on it when you talked about the filtering rules, but a lot of customers I speak to, they want to know how they can move specific people into a specific campaign.
Yes, that is actually the next point that I'm going to be making here. So in addition to each of the default steps that come up here, you can duplicate them, and there's no limit to the number of steps that you have that say leads in Copper to people in reply. So with that being said, you can set your filter rule, and each of the different unique steps can have a different filter rule. So you're pulling in smaller subgroups with each of them, and then you can add an action to each of those steps, which is already done here, and that will be available through this little circle with the plus icon in it. And then you'll be able to specify a sequence that this segment or this filter rule will automatically apply to. So anybody that has the email testers@test.com will automatically be placed in the hope you're having a great day campaign. So this is a great way to kind of cut out the middleman. If you know exactly who you want to reach out to, and you're very accustomed to working in your CRM of choice, organizing everything in the Salesforce side, in the HubSpot side, you don't have to double up your efforts. You can essentially have all of that kind of organized, filtered through, and listed in your CRM. Just duplicate that filter rule within the sync step, and then apply it to any pre-created sequence of your choice. And everyone that meets those criteria on the Salesforce side will automatically be slotted into whatever sequence that you've chosen. So it really is a great option to have. I've worked with multiple teams, 20 plus team members that have had a sync step for each of their independent sales reps. And the filter rule was just based off of the owner of the contact is so-and-so. And then we just segmented based on their particular sequence for that sales rep and slid right in. Saves you a lot of time and just trying to fumble around with the people on the main people page, trying to figure out where they go, who they belong to. So definitely try to capitalize on these actions just to save yourself some time and focus on getting the emails out and working on those engagement rates. This little toggle here, only for new records, it is what it says. If you have it toggled on, it will only start pulling in people that are considered new in reply. So that means they've never been in the account prior to this import. For the most part, I'd say keep it off, just because if you're updating contact records and maybe just making any sort of adjustments on the CRM side, you want those to be mirrored through. So keep it toggled off. But if you do want to keep things very pristine and you want them segmented, you don't want them talking to each other with every new piece of information coming through, the toggle is available for you.
Hey, Josh, I have a question from David.
Absolutely.
He says, can you filter the company name of the email only, for example, at xyz.com, or do you need each person's email address? So can you filter by domain, for example?
You can, and that would usually be a different setting here. These filters are based off of the fields in Copper for this exact example. And so they are based off of whatever CRM you're currently connected to. So they will be different for Salesforce or for HubSpot to the extent of what you've named them. If we had a domain field in our Copper CRM, it would be available to you, and then you could look for that. But for specifically email, you do need to put in the entire string.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. In addition to just the basic kind of leads in Copper to people, we also have for Salesforce and HubSpot, the people statuses and inbox categories. The setup is largely the same. You have available to you the different fields based for the statuses in the aforementioned CRM. So you would be picking from a pre-rendered list of reply options. So that's active, contacted, finished, bounced, replied, opted out, things like that. And then you would just be mapping them to whatever equivalent that you wanted in the CRM of your choice. Same thing goes for inbox categories. It just gets a little bit more sort of detailed. You can then go into replied or not interested, forwarded emails, and then you'll also have the equivalent based to the same locations. You can create custom fields in HubSpot and Salesforce to have a more kind of one-to-one comparison. So you're not just sending everything maybe bounced and opted out to the same thing, to the same general status, maybe disqualified, for instance. You can make any sort of custom options to have it more just one-to-one, understand the language for the rest of your entire team.
And one of the things that I like, if you can see this, if you're looking at Josh's screen right now, you can toggle on and off different fields. So like you can see right here, Josh doesn't have it turned on for people in reply to get pushed to leads in Salesforce or contacts in Salesforce. So a lot of customers that I talk to, they see all the options and the assumption is that all of those toggles have to be on. So there's a lot of information flowing back and forth. But like with Salesforce, you can only have one option turned on if you want to limit the information that's flowing back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest kind of hurdles that I find new users fall into is just immediately turning on their integration and then just kind of getting blasted with all of the contacts or leads that are getting pulled in. You do want to take the time before you initiate your integrations by going in and changing your filter rules, making sure that you deactivate the steps that you don't have any need for. And if you do ever need to come back to it, like I can remove people and reply to leads in Salesforce, and I can just come back at a later date, and the new I can add those sync steps back to my account at any point. So there's no real issue with that.
And Josh, how often, so when the integration is enabled, how often is information flowing, for example, from Salesforce to reply or Copper to reply or vice versa?
So by default, if you never touch it, you've just turned it on. Every 2 hours or so, it's going to perform a sync by itself. So if you don't need instant updates from your contacts, you can just let it do its thing. Though we do have a sync now option for all of our integrations, where if you do want that immediate feedback, you can hit it and it will just start engaging as soon as you hit that button.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm just thinking of like the most common questions that I get when we're on onboarding calls. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The log is essentially just a list of the most recent sync that you've performed. So if there's any errors or missing information, you can come here to check to see what kind of went wrong. Usually there is one kind of finicky bit with Salesforce in general. They have a rule where once you've converted a lead into a contact or any other permanent type, it can no longer be manipulated. So there is a common error that says converted lead could not be synced. That refers to you manually changing them from one permanent type to another, and that prevents us from interacting with it in the future. So for the most part, if you are clearly segmenting leads and contacts or removing them as a lead and then changing them into a contact, that's totally fine. I'm not sure what causes that. I believe it's something that the Salesforce actually has as coded, but that is something to look out for. One other major difference before I move on to Pipedrive and Zendesk is in Salesforce specifically, we do have an extension, and that's essentially a light, compact version of the steps that you see here. It will allow you to create buttons in the actual Salesforce UI where you can pick and choose individual contacts and push them immediately to the general account or to sequences specifically. We are working on a new certification process for that, so it may not be available to you right now, but it should be very soon. And that's more if you don't want large groups or you don't have your lists segmented as kind of clearly as you'd like them to be. Using the extension just kind of helps with getting people from one location to the other, doing it in a very quick manner, and you know exactly who you're kind of targeting with that respect. So definitely can be used, but for more general purposes and for the sake of automation, the native integration just has a lot more complexity to it and works on its own. So you don't have to kind of babysit anything. All right, are there any other questions pertaining to Copper, HubSpot, or Salesforce specifically?
I don't see any questions in the chat. Fernando was asking about Pipedrive. So I know that you're gonna hop on into Pipedrive in a few minutes.
Yes,
so.
indeed. Okay, so we will open it up to general questions at the end as well. So if you do have any questions about Pipedrive specifically, or Salesforce, Copper, HubSpot, feel free to let me know. So with Pipedrive, sorry, it is a little bit different from a UI standpoint. You actually just have a number of different toggles, and they are automatically set. If you want to perform these functions, you simply turn them on. There's no real filter rule options like you had with Salesforce or Copper. Push to campaign is the probably the most complex aspect of this integration. If you turn it on, there's actually a whole nother functionality that you have to do on top of this. So in Pipedrive, there are stages and essentially columns for your entire sales pipeline. And then there are deals that contain contacts. So essentially you will populate a deal full of your individual contact records, and then you can place that deal at any stage in the pipeline of your choice. If you've named the stage, so the entire column, if you've named it the exact same thing, if no extra spaces, punctuality, anything, or punctuation, anything, it has to be the exact same spelling. If you do name them the exact same thing, you move the deal to that particular stage, it will automatically move all of the people in that deal to the sequence that shares that naming convention. So there is a little bit of extra work, but you can more easily manipulate manually the deal, because you can literally drag and drop it, than you can with the Salesforce or HubSpot options, where you would have to go in, update each of your individual sync steps to look at a different segment, and then wait a couple of hours to pull in or hit that sync now button. So there are ups and downs to using Pipedrive over Salesforce. Again, Salesforce, HubSpot, Copper are going to provide the most options available to you, but Pipedrive can achieve very much the same thing. It just has that more manual touch to it. Updating people from persons and creating people from persons is the moment you create a contact record, or the equivalent on the Pipedrive side, we will see that and just mirror the information over. It has the exact same options for the field mappings. So again, any custom options that you want to pull in will be available to you. But other than that, very much the same. The only other thing that you can do with Pipedrive that you can't do with Salesforce is you can select pre-rendered lists from Pipedrive directly and use them as your filter rule in a way. You can't set each of the different criteria like I showed you with Copper, so you can't pick a very specific value and then whether it contains or does not contain a certain numerical value after that. It's just literally a filter that you make in Pipedrive. You can pull from that dropdown, and then that's the only group of people that you will pull in. So more restrictive, but if you do have a filter list that you like that's already created in Pipedrive, we do have access to pull that information. Were there any specific questions in the chat there about Pipedrive, or just general what it's about?
There are no questions right now, but I'll keep an eye on it just in case any come up.
All right, beautiful. So yeah, other than that, no real complexity to it. As long as you understand how those stages in the naming convention operates, you should be able to get everything that you want done. So remember, exact same name, even the smallest differentiator will prevent it from actually pushing people to the sequence of your choice. And then lastly for now is the Zendesk options. So very much in the same vein as the Pipedrive options, you will simply turn the toggles on to update the information that you're looking for. Same options with the mapping. Anything that you create on the Zendesk side will be available to you. The only kind of key differentiator here is going to be the auto update statuses in CRM. So very much like we said with Pipedrive, it's based on naming convention. Instead of stages, this one refers specifically to the lead statuses field. So if you create a lead status with the same naming convention as one of these statuses in reply, when we find that kind of, we see that information coming through on the reply side, we'll be able to push that status update directly into Zendesk, so you have that mirrored version. So active, opened, finished, replied, bounced, opted out, pretty much all those options. It does not contain the same kind of in-depth level as the inbox categories. You cannot label something as interested or things like that. But any of the more general response types will be available to you. So pretty straightforward. Again, no need to change up your regular routine or create a new top to bottom workflow. But these are going to be methods to help automate the transfer and reliance on CSVs, a lot of people will come in and ask the question of how can I avoid duplication? Or how do I know that one person is only reaching out to contacts that are available to them? The CRMs essentially will help you solve that. They have built-in options to segment people based on ownership, and then you can map fields that have the owner column so you can more easily filter that information in reply to avoid doubling up on anybody. In the cases of the add action steps for Salesforce, HubSpot, and Copper, the action will instantly move people from one campaign to another based on the exact rule set. And if they do not meet the criteria that you've set in the rule, it won't be applicable to them. So you don't have to worry about having any of those little manual hiccups and duplication efforts through CSV files.
Josh, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something that I hear from a lot of customers, and this is more in relation to team accounts.
Sure.
So let's just say there's a team account, there's 5 users or team members on a team. Would each user or team member have to set up the integration specific to their Salesforce account, for example? How does that look?
Good question. So there's 2 answers to this. If you are on a team account, but everything is set to private, meaning aside from the owner, everyone is a siloed account, you would need to have an individual instance of your integration for every user. Because it's set to private, the different accounts cannot communicate with each other. So the CRM would have to be connected on a one-to-one basis so that you're pulling in the information that you need. You can still accomplish the automation that you're looking for. It just takes that much more setup time depending on the number of users that you have. If you have it set to public mode, if you do not care about the visibility and you're looking for that cooperation amongst your different users, you can essentially set up one instance of integration. It does not matter whose account it's in. It could be the owners, it could be one of the other users, but essentially you only need one, and it can be applicable to everyone on the team because it has a shared UI. There is one kind of general pool for contacts. Everything is going into the same little bin, and then you will have access in this dropdown to every single person's sequences here. Using this as the example, a lot of these different campaigns are test campaigns for other people at Reply. They're not just the ones that I've used. And I could send them to any one of them without issue. Any other questions? I saw a couple come in.
A question did come in. It was about the previous sessions from Michael. So I was actually just going to type in the chat. But yes, there were 2 sessions previous to this. The first one was on just the basics of the platform. The second was on content best practices. So I will definitely share the link with everyone that's here. They're on our reply.io YouTube channel, but I will get the link for you guys in a few minutes, and I'll drop it in the chat for you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, we plan on doing these every 2 weeks. This one is going to be a rather shorter one unless people have a lot more specific questions for us. Usually it's going to be very dependent on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Some people like the manual nature of CSV files just because they can make sure that everything is working according to plan. I find that the larger your team is, the more dependent you're going to be on automation. So things like Copper, HubSpot, and Salesforce are really going to streamline your usability of Reply. So I do recommend leaning into that aspect of it. It just, again, prevents that duplication. We do have backend settings that help prevent duplication, but there ultimately is nothing that we can do if you are manually moving someone from one sequence to another and just not realizing that they're being emailed by one of your other team members. This can help you prevent that from happening just because if it does not meet that exact criteria that you've set, it will not move anywhere. Even if you do move out. So for example, if I have this set up, if I move them out of Hope You're Having a Great Day, and it goes back to the CRM and sees that it meets this criteria, it will move the person back into the sequence that I've designated. So if you are accidentally moving people from one place to another, this will help move them back and prevent that, that issue from happening. Any other questions?
One thing that I also wanted to mention, we've been talking a lot about HubSpot, or we've been, mentioning HubSpot. Currently, HubSpot, that integration is currently available in beta. So if you are on the integrations page of your account, if it's not looking like what you see on Josh's account, you can always go into settings, beta. If you enable the beta features, you will have access to the HubSpot integration, as well as a lot of other of our beta features right now. But the HubSpot integration being the biggest one. And
Yeah,
also,
absolutely.
talking about, Pipedrive and Zendesk Sell. Obviously, the options are fewer than Salesforce or Copper or HubSpot, but there are some additional options if you're open to using Zapier, for example. We do have connections with Zapier. We can connect to over 1,000 different apps via API. So there are some more options there.
Yeah, that we decided not to talk about that too much today, simply because it is designed very similarly to the other tasks that we have available. And this is going to be its own call. Essentially, you can do a lot of what I talked about through the native integrations through Zapier, which, again, just to clarify, is its own product. It is not actually directly tied to Reply. We just happen to have a nice cooperation with them. And yeah, you can essentially do a lot of automation based purely off of certain triggers. And the one thing that Zapier gives you access to that the native integrations don't at this time is more specific triggers. So for example, if I place the Zapier step in the middle of my sequence, it's only going to trigger that automation at that exact point, as opposed to a generic update every couple of hours. Some people, larger teams specifically, do run into API clog depending on how tall their tech stack is. And having a system that's automatically updating every couple of hours, even if there's not a ton of information to pull in, can be a little bit of an extra load that you don't need. So in those cases, Zapier would be a better fit for you. And Zapier has access to things like HubSpot and Salesforce and Copper. So if you're already using Zapier, it may be beneficial to add it directly into your sequence as opposed to the general native integration. I saw a few things come into chat. So yeah, what do we got?
That was me sending a bunch of links. But another question actually did come in. When using LinkedIn, for example, can I bring contacts from reply.io to Pipedrive using the Reply Chrome extension?
So you're talking about moving people from Reply into Pipedrive, or vice versa?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Currently, the extensions and the integration are one way. We are pulling the information from Pipedrive or from LinkedIn into Reply. You can filter for specific lists and then export them as CSVs and move them into Pipedrive. And I do know we had a call rather recently where an updated Pipedrive integration was on the roadmap. I don't have any specifics as to a date, but that is something that we plan on doing. So in the future, we'll probably have a bidirectional option where it'll be more in line with things like Salesforce and HubSpot. But for the time being, the answer is not automatically, but you can export via CSV and plop that into your Pipedrive account. While on the topic of the extension, if you don't want to use the integration, the LinkedIn extension also has functionality with HubSpot, Salesforce, Copper, things like that. So if you do have lead lists in your CRMs, you can just open up the Chrome extension, find those lists, and then hit the Find Emails option, and we will scan your own lists, and presumably they all have emails, and then you can instantly transport them into Reply that way as well. So it's a little bit more involved, but if you are having trouble setting up your filtering rules or finding the exact options that you're looking for, the LinkedIn extension can help in that respect.
All right. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I did want to mention that this is being recorded. It's going to be sent to everyone who signed up. So whether people were able to attend or not, we're going to send the recording out to everyone. And as I mentioned before, these sessions are all going to be posted on our YouTube channel on reply.io, so you can access them there as well if you just want to kind of go back and take a look at what we covered. So So yeah, any more questions about any of our native integrations? Anything that we can kind of touch on before we let you guys go? We might give you, 20 minutes back to your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're here, these are just some of these Zapier options that we have available. But again, literally any company that has integrated with Zapier, we will be able to do something with. It is very dependent on the actions and triggers that they have made available for use.
Yeah, so you will notice that if you are utilizing Zapier to connect to any CRM or any other platform via reply, the triggers will vary depending on the platform that you are connecting to reply. So it's not static, they will vary depending on what you're connecting.
Yeah, so typically newer tech companies out there have not had an opportunity to work with Zapier yet. So those will usually be off the table, whereas more seasoned veterans in the tech space will have a plethora of options. So may that influence your decision to utilize Zapier within reply or not.
And if you guys have any additional questions about our integrations, you can always reach out to our support team via live chat in the bottom right corner. You can also reach out to myself or Josh or anyone on the client success team. Before we go, there is one other question. Is there some expectation to have replies Chrome extension linked to Pipedrive?
I haven't heard of anything yet. Though that's absolutely something that we can push through if we have the functionality available for those other options. I'm not a coder myself, so I don't want to set expectations there, but I will definitely bring it up to the team and see if there's something that they can do.
Yeah, and our team is really open to suggestions from our customers. One of the reasons that our team is working on enhancing the Pipedrive integrations because we have heard from a lot of our customers that they are using Pipedrive and they would like the ability to automate more and bring more information back and forth. So that's one of the reasons that they are working on it. So anything that you see in the platform, anything that you maybe some feature requests, feature recommendations, definitely let us know and we'll pass it on to our team.
Yep, absolutely. Anything you guys want, we are here for you. And yeah, I'm just looking through the chat here to see if we missed anything. Stephanie probably already mentioned it. These are all on YouTube as well. So if you just search reply.io on YouTube, you will be able to find our beautiful faces talking about tech stuff. And yeah, so far the other two are on there. So 2 hours of us just talking about initial setup and copywriting content, which everyone has been finding useful. So if you do want some tips and tricks there, feel free to hop on over and yeah, hopefully you get some nice benefit out of it.
All right, so yeah, so we'll get going. Like I said, we'll give you 20 minutes back of your day. But yeah, any questions, reach out to myself or Josh or our support team. We're always happy to help.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us again. The next call will probably be a lot more in-depth. It is going to go into the multi-channel sequences and whatnot. So look forward to the next update. Thank you guys for coming. Bye.